Okay, we're live.
Vlad, you should also bring the picture. Or we should just move the chairs closer.
Do you have the questions here then?
No, you've got it on the screen.
Okay, cool.
But how do we know if people are connected? Well, the link is not shared, obviously. But how do we get the link?
I think there's a share button here, I guess. There are 5 people, 8 people. Hey, if anyone hears that, just say something in the chat. We don't know if that's working. Is there like 11? I guess the mic is working. Yeah, no.
Do you hear us?
No. Come on, let's see.
Let's say something.
Yep, you're hearing. Oh, cool.
Sounds good.
Looks like it's working. Never mind the thumbnail. I'm gonna move my shoulder here to avoid this lamp here. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're in a very interesting place to do a live stream. I've never done that from a German terrace. How's everyone?
Das ist super. Du hast quasi deine ganz normale Aufkantung hinten runter und dann ist hinten nochmal ein E drauf geklebt. Du brauchst quasi nur oben das Profil und dann mal weiter das Profil.
Okay, so hi everyone, and we are about to start our Berlin AMA, which we promised. And the first question, today we're going to split the questions between Angel and Vlad. So Angel is to start, and
no, Vlad is to start.
So we start first with you, Vlad.
Sure. If there's a lot of noise in the background, there are cars. We're on the street. There are people having a beer next table. It's very social. If there's too much noise, just let us know, and we'll go inside. We're in Germany, so happy to be here. Cool.
Okay, so
it's a good start.
Yeah, I think everyone calm down in the background, and we are ready to start. And the first question goes to Vlad. So first of all, we start with the masternode questions. So to store private data, the companies need to purchase Hermes node for 150k tokens. But how are we going to grow and have new big partners if total supply of tokens is limited and the most of the tokens will be locked for the master node?
Sure. So the most important thing is to quickly understand what are the different nodes in the network. So I'll just begin with that. Apollo master nodes, they are the ones running the Ambrosus blockchain. So they're essentially validators in the Ethereum sense of Then we have Hermes nodes. Those nodes are essentially provide an API for all sorts of application for anyone wanting to write data. They send that data to Hermes nodes, and then Hermes nodes take all that data, package it, and puts that data in the form of bundles on the blockchain. And then you have, of course, Atlas nodes who are going to be storing those bundles. Now, what's really important is that the amount of Hermes nodes and the real value of someone running a Hermes node is that they can build new applications. They can extend the source code of the Hermes node, which is open source. They can add a lot of new functionality and then build new services they can resell to other companies as well. So if someone is very specialized in one industry, they can create a customized Hermes node and they can then resell. So that means there's no issue whatsoever with how many Hermes nodes are in the network. The real most important metric we should all be interested is how many bundles are going to be created. So it's a lot more interesting to have few Hermes nodes that create a lot of bundles rather than having a lot of Hermes nodes that create very few bundles. So the real metric is how many bundles are created daily. And we're also exploring how developers, how easy it is for someone to start sending data, to start using Hermes nodes. And we will have our own Hermes nodes, and we can provide access to any developers without the need for them to set up their own Hermes node. If a big company, if someone is using Ambrosus a lot, then it becomes a lot more interesting to set up your own Hermes node.
Okay, but speaking of the Atlas nodes, which you also mentioned, so are they also responsible for challenging other Atlas nodes and thus copying the data? So, I mean, like, how does it work beyond the initial 5 challenges that also have reward attached to them?
Sure. So I think first, as you have noticed in the last post, we have increased the number from 5 to 7. So every time you create a bundle, which costs $12, $7 will be used to go to 7 Atlas master nodes to store a copy of that bundle. The chat is on fire. So what's really important here is what a challenge means. First, to do a challenge, you have to pay $1 US equivalent. So every time someone wants to challenge any Atlas node, because he may not have the data, you pay $1 and you can challenge that node. And then someone else may say, yes, I've got the data from that Apollo node, so the data is indeed available there, and then they will be responsible for sheltering a copy of that data as well. So every time another Atlas node answers to a challenge, he will automatically be a copy holder for a new bundle. So for every new challenge on a specific bundle on a specific Atlas, there will be one more copy. And don't forget that every time someone creates a challenge, it costs $1. And that dollar will go to the new Atlas node in question.
However, do we have any limitations on copying the data? Like, I mean, can we only copy it 5 times and shelter it by only 5 nodes?
There is no upper limit, and that's very interesting because technically anyone can look at the data which is out there. Anyone can create a copy if they want, but you need to be challenged and you need to respond a challenge to earn some Ember tokens to be rewarded. So that's a very important point, is that there's no upper limit whatsoever.
Okay, so but will latency or server location have an impact in rewards for Apollo and Atlas nodes? Or will there be something like a queue for nodes to capture block validation and bundle rewards?
Sure. So for Apollo nodes, there is no difference in between one. There will be no influence on the connectivity and the type of servers, because Apollo nodes, because it's a POA network, every node will have its turn in order to create. So in the longer term, over time, every Apollo node will be rewarded the same time, and every Apollo node will have the option to mine a block every turn. So there's no difference. On the Atlas side, the most important thing is it's about speed, because when someone creates a bundle out there, the 7 fastest Atlas nodes that see the challenge and respond to it will be earning. But remember that there will be an upper cap on how many bundles can hold. So the main difference, the difference isn't going to be big. So there wouldn't be like 2 Atlas nodes taking all the data. That would require a lot of infrastructure, which will not be obvious to obtain. So there will be, in average, especially in the longer term, an equivalence of that.
Okay, Vlad, you also said on Reddit that nodes benefiting from a faster connections will get filled a lot faster than nodes with a slower connection. So does it mean what's the most optimal speed connection to get the most reward of the node?
So I don't think it's that. I don't think it's so much about which speed connection. You need to have a very decent server, and the most important thing is your Atlas node will need, technically speaking, will need to be able to detect when new bundles are being created. So that means the real proximity is how close you are to many Apollo nodes, because they are the ones, and any node in the network. So that means geographically, as long as we have nodes distributed, it won't be better to have a node in South America, let's say, or in Asia, because that would be distributed, and the probability will be more and more equal as the network grows in size.
So, for example, are we right to assume that 250k AMB locked in an Apollo node will always get more return than 250k locked in Omega nodes?
It's an interesting question. What's important is that Atlas nodes do have a limit on how many bundles they can store. So once you have reached that limit, you will have to wait until some of your bundles expire, but you will always have a cap. That cap we're discussing, of course, and I know there are a few questions about that. That cap, we're still finalizing the exact number, what the optimal number is. We try to find a trade-off between network scalability and everyone having the ability to join the network. So this is not a very easy number to reach. And to answer exactly that question, there is no such limit on the number of Apollo nodes, and the number of Apollo nodes in the network will be smaller than the number of Atlas nodes, obviously. And that means as usage of the network grows, there will be no such cap for higher cap for Apollo nodes.
But how many Zeta nodes will be needed on the network?
That's a good question. I think it's hard to give an answer like that. That number will depend on the traffic, essentially. So the more bundles will be created, the more nodes will be opened and onboarded. And I think obviously we're trying to find the perfect balance between everyone who desires to run a node, that they have the ability to do those in the near future. And obviously the more nodes there will be, the less the rewards can be earned by nodes. So we need to find a very, very good balance between scalability and providing the service Ambrosus needs to provide to our customers, and at the same time ensuring that the nodes and everyone participating has a good incentive to do so.
Okay, so now I have questions for Angel.
Mm-hmm.
Switch.
Just a second, please. Okay, so we start with KYC. Just a second, technical.
Yeah.
So starting with KYC, which KYC will be more rigorous, like the KYC for an individual or KYC for a single member company?
Well, in general, as a rule, the KYC process in companies usually needs to verify the ultimate beneficial owner of the company, so who's ultimately getting the profits. So in this case, if it's a sole tradership or another kind of legal entity with a sole owner manager, I don't imagine that the process for such a company would be more complicated in terms of KYC than for an individual. So from that perspective, it doesn't really matter too much. As long as the person is not under some kind of embargo or blacklisted or otherwise under sanctions, it should not be a problem, and there should not be a difference between the two.
But do a place in which a company is based or annual sales date of establishment affect the possibility of the company passing or not passing through the KYC?
In general, we're likely to use the OFAC list to check against the persons or legal entities that might be under some sort of embargo or otherwise red flagged. Otherwise, the jurisdiction and the date of establishment of company are not that relevant. Of course, for Apollo nodes, we're going to give the preference to the established companies who already might have some credibility, because they're going to be the key stakeholders to assure the integrity of the network. But otherwise, we will obviously take care of the interests of the community. So we will make sure that it's not only putting a preference for legal entities as opposed to individuals.
Okay, so now we move to another section about partnerships. So, like a few months ago in March, Ambrosus announced a partnership with the Swiss Coffee Alliance. The community wants to have an update on what's going on about this partnership.
Yes, so the Swiss Coffee Alliance, they've opened various networks to us that permitted us to start various negotiations with companies. So we've started developing use cases, POCs, as well as developed a proper app specifically for the coffee industry. I think we've shared some of the screenshots in one of the blog posts, but there is basically a proper app that we're now testing in terms of how it could be used for the coffee industry and how it could actually help consumers make a better informed choice of the coffee and how we could engage the consumers. Right now, we're kind of tweaking the product and iterating on this to make sure that it feeds the needs of the companies as well as responds to the interests of the consumers. So we're going to release a blog entry specifically about the coffee app update with walkthrough and with some pictures, with some actually screenshots of the app I would say towards the end of August.
I mean, like, so there have been people saying that Ambrosus has released too few partnerships. Like, what's your comment on that?
So in general, on the partnerships, it's true that there are a few partnerships that have been made public so far. In general, corporations are obviously quite sensitive towards the crypto sector in general, so there is a lot of red tape and internal things to navigate within the companies. So in terms of the technology, they're obviously excited to explore it and to see how it works, and they see a lot of benefit potentially to improving their operations as well as providing them with new streams of revenue and ways to engage the consumers. But at the same time, in terms of actually getting this public, we need to go through quite a few legal and regulatory aspects with large corporates. So basically, the ball is on their side. We're on a good track with a few companies, and we're making plans to release partnerships in the foreseeable future. So the further partnerships will begin in September, actually. So we're finalizing some, and one of the main ones will be linked to the documentary.
Okay, so does Ambrosus have plans or goals to increase the number of companies in its pipeline in near or midterm future? If so, can you speak about this?
Yes, that's definitely the goal, and the expansion to Dublin with the opening of the Irish office that will focus on business development in particular and engaging the corporates will focus on that part. So the goal is obviously to accelerate the corporate adoption and to make sure that all the parties to whom we have demonstrated the value of AMBNet and showed some POCs or demos of the dApps, that we could actually transform that into kind of long-term partnerships where they would adopt the system and integrate them into their supply chains.
Okay, so will new partnerships be revealed with the upcoming unveiling of proof of concepts and mini documentary? If that's not the case, and at the unveiling of their respective proof of concept or future partnership announcement, it will greatly help the public and the community to see the depths and progress of such partnerships.
Yes, so the upcoming documentary movie is actually going to be not just overview of what we did, but actually it's going to unveil the partnership with one of the companies in the sector. So it will actually be linked to an example of the adoption of Ambrosus technology.
So with regards to the numerous NDAs you spoke about months ago, like, are these companies still collaborating with Ambrosus?
Yes, so as previously mentioned, we have not had a breakdown in negotiations with any of the companies so far. So we're currently iterating on the commercial aspects as well as defining the product that they wish to use or they wish to build on top of AMBNet. So the discussions are still ongoing. None of the companies have dropped out, and we're working out the ways to how we can establish this relationship and how we could communicate this externally. Of course, as has been said, we're working with these large pharma companies or food companies. So obviously there's a lot of secrecy involved, and it takes a lot of kind of red tape to go through before they're ready to go public with it. But from that perspective, in terms of those companies we started engaging, none of them have actually dropped out. None of them said, hey guys, we're not interested. So we're still talking to all of them. We're still iterating the product and building the POCs. And the goal of the new hires, so people such as Filippo Bellintani, who joined us as project manager recently, and a few other hires, their specific focus is to drive those collaborations towards public partnerships.
But how many companies have indicated that they're going to use the AMBNet in the long term?
Yes, so quite a lot of them expressed interest, and this is why it's so important that we thoroughly demonstrate for them how the system works, how our team works. Because importantly, quite a few companies said, you know, there are a lot of companies offering blockchain solutions also for the supply chain, and they like the fact that on our side we do combine the expertise in IoT with the blockchain, as well as the fact that simply they say, you know, a lot of people can talk about it, very few people can execute on this. So the goal on our side is for our team, for the product team, for the solutions team, to consistently demonstrate that they can deliver these POCs, that these dApps for the companies, and that would encourage them to adopt it long term for the on the commercial basis. So from that perspective, many of them want to see how we work in practice, and then they will agree to a proper partnership and long-term adoption of AMBNet. But in general, they said that the technology itself is highly interesting to them.
But have any of these companies actually had dApps built specifically for them?
Yeah, we've built quite a few dApps for these collaborations with companies. Some of those dApps have been unveiled by the community. I think some of them have been found. So some people have, found out some of the applications we did. We're planning over the next 2 months to actually make a few blog posts and to release also the more information about these dApps we've built for different use cases. And the plan is also to open source some of those dApps, so we'll make sure that perhaps people, the community, can also find potential new applications for these solutions.
So do you still stand by your prediction of 1 million bundles per day?
So in terms of the prediction for 1 million bundles per day, that was my discussion of the long-term adoption. So obviously, once we do have the proper adoption of the AMBNet, I don't see that as an unrealistic result. So yeah, long-term, that's pretty realistic.
But what's the duration of the NDAs? How long are they going to be valid?
The NDAs themselves, usually the standard ones are 5 years. Some of them are indefinite. The point is that the NDA can be only kind of lifted if the counterparty agrees to it. So in this case, if the company is ready to go public, they're ready. They will be able to say, okay, we're ready to break the NDA and go public with the collaboration.
Okay, like so somebody asks Angel, like, what's your favorite holiday destination and what's your tiples?
I haven't had holiday for a few years, so I wouldn't know how to answer that question.
Okay, so now we move back to Vlad. Vlad, we know you're still running solutions and that there are many determinants to consider. AMBNet running as efficiently as possible is in all our interests. But as node holders, naturally, the community is very curious about the limitations of the nodes. So, like, even if the numbers are not yet fine-tuned, like, what's the ballpark estimate of the bundle quotas for each Atlas node?
It's clearly one of the number that we're still, as I mentioned before, that we're still evaluating. We do have a certain sweet spot that we think we have identified. We just want to run the necessary tests, and especially as we have just soft launched, I would say, mainnet literally a few days ago in practice, and we start now onboarding private node holders. In August onwards, we'll start onboarding more and more community nodes as well, who will be able to run some nodes. And for that, as we mentioned in last post, we'll be sending an application form via newsletter. And that exact number, we still wait until we have all the data, all the simulation necessary. But in short, it's maybe larger than you think, which means the more data you're storing, the more Amber you will be rewarded. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that this number is bigger than you think. That's what I can say for that.
But how many Apollo or Atlas nodes will be added when AMBNet 1.1 is launched? So will there be an auction system for Apollo too?
Again, I think that will first and foremost depend on how many bundles are created, and that will depend on, as Angela mentioned before, on how quickly we'll be able to progress on those large customer projects. The most important thing around that is we have been exploring and discussing the notion of Apollo nodes, and one thing which we have recently evaluated is the ability for the quota, and I've seen some question about the max cap. We are investigating how that quota can be increased over time. So that means the best Apollo nodes out there who are doing a very good job, who are really online, they provide an excellent performance to the network. They will be also rewarded by increasing over time the max amount of bundles they can increase. Equally for this auction system, that will not be the only way to get a node. That will be one mechanism from which we will be taking and onboarding new nodes. But as we also mentioned, other factors will be equally important, such as for how long you've been supporting the community, what's your technical experience, and also one of the most important factors will be on the testnet. So the testnet will be more easily, more rapidly onboarding new nodes, so you can get a hand, you can see how that's working with literally no risk on your side, and based on your performance on how that's going, then we'll be onboarding more and more nodes on that. But I think those numbers will really depend on.
But for example, can Apollo node be run by a company even if it's controlled by an individual who already is running an Apollo?
So that's a very important question. Our policy on that so far has been to make sure that there's only one Apollo node to the same entity. Now, if someone has privately one node and wants as a business to apply for a second Apollo node, we will look into that, but it's unlikely that at least in the first stages, this will be allowed, because we are really, really keen to keep our network as decentralized as possible. That's our long-term strategy, is to ensure that we have an equal quantity of nodes that are owned by partners and by ourselves, by our customers and companies who are working with us, and equally by the community. And it's important we keep those three in balance to guarantee that the interest of the whole network is shared, and obviously the upsides.
But how does the company actually buy the Apollo node? Like, do they buy the Apollo node through the team, or which way?
So it's not really a buying. Again, for Apollo node, it's a deposit, right? So the official way you will be able to do that is as soon as we announce that through our newsletter, there will be an application form. Everyone who is interested in running a node, be it Hermes, be it Atlas, be Apollo, will have to submit at least an application. The faster you do, the better, because that will provide us information. We'll rapidly have a better understanding of the desire of the community to run and participate into that. That will play a role in the selection, of course, of those nodes. Not necessarily the most important role, but you need to fill in this form first, this application. Once we understand how that works, we'll be opening more and more slots, so that would be easy. So that would be easier to onboard new nodes, and all the details, all the technicalities of how that's done. Essentially, once you apply, we on our side will try to elaborate, to liberate new spots for those nodes over time. And as soon as we have a spot for you, we'll notify you through email and say, okay, now you have the ability to run a node, and you'll have a certain period of time, a time window, during which you will have to deposit that amount into a smart contract. As soon as you have deposited that amount into a smart contract, you would essentially be held there, and that will be a necessary requirement for you to run an Apollo and an Atlas node. And until the time you want to retire and stop operating a node, that deposit will be there. It will only be used in case you are misbehaving with the network, if there are any malicious activity that we can detect. Otherwise, you will be returned as soon as you want to stop having a master node, and your spot will go to someone else. So it's really important to understand that there will be this process. We'll try to have as many community members having a node as quickly as possible, and we're enduring the best model to make sure that everyone needs is essentially satisfied.
But how many master nodes will be activated at launch per each time exactly?
Again, same question as before. I think that will really depend on the test network, because that will allow us to do a lot more simulation and test a lot of new edge cases based on our learnings and testing on the testnet. Then we'll be liberating more and more spots for master nodes on the mainnet. And as I said, the performance and the work you will be doing on the testnet will be a factor on how quickly you learn a spot on the mainnet.
But like, what's the priority of acquiring the master nodes? For example, there are like two things. Like, should a person who participated in TG but traded get a priority, or a person who participated in TG but never traded get a priority?
Maybe you answer that part, or I can jump in.
Concerning
for what's the priority, who participated in the TG and traded or not?
Yeah, so that's actually, I think it was also in my questions, the same one. So in general, there was a question on whether, let's say, somebody who's held tokens for a longer time with a smaller amount is going to be less prioritized than somebody with a higher amount held over a shorter period of time. So in general, the first part that we thought is, no matter how small the amount was, as long as it qualifies for a Zeta, those who've held it longer will get a priority over those who might have a bigger amount who've held for kind of shorter period of time. And in terms of whether it's been traded or not, so we consider it as an uninterrupted storage of Amber. So basically in AmpNet, users will have to stake their tokens into the master node to provide the integrity of the network, and for that to serve as a sort of a mechanism to assure their honest behavior. Thus, to mirror this behavior, we will also look at, if Amber has been in the same wallet or not. If it's been moved around and traded, we consider that that was an interrupted storage. So we'll look for those who held longest without moving it around.
Okay, so is there a limit on how many Apollo nodes there can exist?
So of course there is in theory a limit. What's important for us is to ensure growth of our system. So a lot of the research we'll be doing over the next few months, a lot of that research will go in how we can increase the number of Apollo nodes without affecting the performance of the nodes already in the network, their operations and how they work. So we're really looking into that and have the ability to scale. Technically, there's no upper limit, of course, but the priority is, of course, to make sure that the network works as behaved, as required, that the performance we need for our corporate customer is there, the reliability, the security is there, and as soon as we get that those tests passing and that development, then we'll be, of course, opening more and more new slots. So we definitely don't want to put a hard line in the sand and say, yeah, that's the maximum amount of tokens. Other networks might try to use those techniques. We're not looking into that. We're a lot more interested in ensuring growth of our network for the community and, of course, for the companies who are using it.
But why is the team not implementing daily rewards, like instead of 28 days?
So first answer is performance. If we were to do daily rewards to a lot of masternode, that means a lot of transaction. A lot of transaction means much less bandwidth to do more important non-reward or transfer. So performance is the first answer. And second, why 28? Because it's 4 weeks and a month is 4 weeks, and we like good numbers, and that's the most interesting aspect. But we just found that 28 days is a fair number. Maybe there's another question afterwards coming to that as well afterwards.
Okay, so now we switch back to Angel. Just a second, technical. Okay, so a few users have now voiced their concerns about no email responses after signing up for the newsletter. Like, is it working properly?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, we have fixed that part, so it should be working well. Maybe, actually, I don't know, Vlad, if people get the confirmation when they sign up or not.
I think that's a setting we need to check. I think that's an important point. There should be a way for the community. So I know there was a bug being reported. So the sign up was working. So we did get a lot of new signups in the last few days. But there was a bug with the actual library we're using on WordPress that didn't remove the spinner, but the subscription. So if you have subscribed in the last few days, we definitely got the subscription. So we've got a few. So I think, but the confirmation is an important point, and the ability as well for anyone just to check. I think that's something that we can write down and put that in place, because I think that's valuable. But in short, if you're not sure, the best thing is you sign up once more with another address if you have any doubts. When you will be applying for a node, just use the comments. There would be, of course, a comments box, and tell, hey, I've signed up already. This is the email address I've used for the TGE. The more information you provide us, the easier it will make it for us to do a fair and balanced selection of those nodes.
Okay, like you previously mentioned this mini documentary about the pilot project. Like, is it will it be on YouTube?
Yes, it will definitely be on our channel, and we're planning to put it. We're planning to release it in the first week of September.
Okay, so previously it was mentioned that now processes of the proof of concepts and companies in their pipelines, and so like thereby less focused on actively searching out new clients. Can you comment some more on why this is the case?
So in terms of the getting new people on board. So the point is, it's the new clients, kind of the first few meetings with companies, that's the easy part. So that's when you actually introduce the technology, you verify with them that they're interested in this, and you're looking for, solutions for them to digitalize their supply chains or to improve their processes. Many companies are interested in this. So, getting kind of a new client in this sense, the first outreach is the easy part. However, it's when we actually bring it down as a commercial partnership. This is when it becomes a more challenging issue and where more workforce is needed. So from that perspective, when I mentioned in the AMA that we're going to focus on closing those deals, it means that we're putting more effort and more manpower on securing partnerships with companies with whom we've already started working, to whom we've already built POCs, or with whom we've piloted. And then, of course, in parallel, we're also going to onboard new clients whenever possible.
But how long will it take for the enterprises to migrate to AMB.NET if they choose it? Is it time consuming and needs a step-by-step adoption, or can they migrate all their products on AMB if they deem that the POC is successful?
So this depends on the level of integration they want. So either they can simply run our network and run our nodes and products. So we've obviously put them out there. They're open source. So the companies can technically use their own IT teams to launch them. However, they can also, of course, use kind of we would call it something like blockchain as a service, whereby we could actually run a Hermes node for them, delivering services and recording their transactions. And they simply actually make use of those services. And in that case, they don't need any time to migrate to AMB, so to say. They simply integrate it into their existing solutions, and that means that the rest of the job is taken care of by AMB.NET. So another aspect that I would say is important is obviously using another system is not only a technical question, but it's also a question of training the employees of the companies. So it's also important for us also to make our tools easy to use and the UI that is intuitive and convenient for people. And this, we hope, has been evident in the products that we've released, and also in the screenshots of some of the dashboards that we've released and so on for the supply chain, that it intends to be simple to use and elegant. So this is the point, that we want the adoption to be as seamless as possible.
Okay, so we have another question about the wood industry. So the community member writes the following. So I live in the heartland of forestry, and cataloging and tracking timber is costly and full of paperwork, both from a harvesting and distribution point of view. I think that Ambrosus could be used to track timber, but also to help curb illegal logging globally. Is it possible that AMB expand to this area?
So in general, digitalization of supply chains and track and trace and validating where the product has been and what's happened to it, it's a valuable application, and it's got promise in a range of markets. That also includes, obviously, the timber industry. So I would say that we obviously welcome any such suggestions, and especially if the person, so you mentioned that the community member actually lives in the area and maybe there are businesses around it, we always appreciate these leads or development of use cases on top of AMB.NET. Obviously, our team cannot handle all the possible use cases out there, but at the same time, of course, if anybody comes with particular proposals or can offer some use cases, we will be happy both to reward that person and also to see how we could provide the tools for these companies to use it. So we are building our tools to be used universally. So we've selected for ourselves currently food, pharmaceuticals, and commodities to focus on. But in general, if the community finds new applications for AMB.NET, we're more than happy for them to explore it, and whenever possible, we will also support them on that.
What's the currently projected conversion rate from presentation to proof of concept? And from one more question before that. So outside the food and pharma industry, are there any other industries who can benefit greatly from the use of AMB.NET and its sensors?
So we have been developing quite a few POCs in the commodities sector. So it's obviously a huge area and a huge market. And as mentioned in the previous comment, a lot of the applications we built for the food and pharmaceuticals can easily be applied there. So we're talking about, where the materials came from, also what happened to them on the way, quality assurance, ownership, and traceability. So from that perspective, we can simply make use of the same technology we've built for food and pharma and apply them in the commodities sector. And we're already talking to some companies on that front, and these are big markets. Some other use cases we've been developing are for luxury goods as well as as kind of electronic equipment and spare parts, again, it all comes down to the vertical of traceability. You just, finding, where the product comes from and having that as a trusted record on the platform. So from that perspective, we're trying to create tools that can be versatile and that we could apply to a wide variety of markets, and that many companies could perhaps discover it and make use of them, and then we will just be building additional tools. The important thing is that we want all of these tools to help grow the usage of AmpNet, and from that, as many industries that start using it, it's of course we're very happy to support them on that.
But so what's the projected conversion rate from presentation to proof of concept, and from proof of concept to one account? How effective are these proof of concepts? Present 100 and win 1, present 100 and win 10. Like, the conversion rate in this new field of technology would be interesting.
Yes, from that perspective, it's what I started mentioning about the kind of initial outreach versus the kind of what turns out into proof of concept and then ultimately to the account. So in general, the companies, of course, are interested, but then converting them to first, there are multiple risks, of course, for the companies. The first one is, it's obviously, in general, it's a blockchain itself is a new technology. So they want to see to what extent can they actually put their operations, put their supply chains, which for the companies we're dealing with, that's the livelihood of their business. They cannot afford for these supply chains to be disrupted. They cannot afford for the data to be corrupted, because they can potentially lose billions of dollars in value. They can potentially have some fines and so on. So from that perspective, there are many areas where they have to rigorously test out this solution before they can take a decision to ultimately adopt it or integrate it into their supply chains. And if they actually do find value in that, perhaps for one particular use case where they could adopt it for one particular product, then we use that to actually have a proper kind of large-scale pilot project to prove them that the technology is valuable for them, and then it can bring benefits for them, and they can see how it works, they can calculate all the risks, and they can educate their employees, and from then on they could expand it. So I would say that the funnel is obviously quite, it's converging quite fast, so perhaps a lot of companies would be interested, but very few of them would move to the next stage. But we will go with those who are interested in making their supply chains transparent, or those who do want to prove the quality of their products to their consumers, and that becomes an increasingly important aspect in this competitive industry, of course.
Okay, so now I switch again back to Vlad. So would Ambrosus ever consider in the future lowering the Atlas Masternode requirements to less than 10,000 MB?
So I would say it's quite unlikely we'll do that. I think we are, and that's why we're fine-tuning those numbers, is to ensure that that there is no reason to reduce that number. What will be very interesting is maybe members of the community or implementers who will be running those nodes. They might want to explore the option of pulling different smaller token holders together and run a node together. That might, if someone wants to do that, we'll definitely not prevent them, and we'll support if we can for that happening. I think there are many opportunities like this one ahead. There are so many we haven't yet found ourselves. So if someone in the community wants to explore those topics further, we'd be very interested to discuss. So you can always reach out and we can discuss that option more specifically.
But for example, if someone used Ledger to store their ERC20 tokens, are they still able to onboard just as fast to stake for a node, or will they have to wait until Ledger support arrives?
No, I don't think that's really an issue. So for the moment, and I think we mentioned that as well in our last update, we will keep both ERC20 tokens and the native tokens in parallel for a while, and the reasons for that are obvious. First, on one hand, is the ERC20 support, in exchanges on Ledger, on many of those hardware wallets, for example. That's one thing we want to leverage and profit from, and at the same time have the benefits of the native currency. There will be, of course, a one-on-one mapping. I don't think there will be a major difference in that, because the onboarding will happen when there will be a slot assigned to you after you have applied, and you will have a certain time window to to do that transfer.
Okay, so just a second, technical break.
Technical break. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so but for example, will reward be awarded after each challenge and just held by the smart contract to be distributed every 4 weeks, or will rewards be calculated and rewarded once every 4 weeks?
No, so the way it works is every time an Atlas node accepts a challenge, he will get to store a bundle for a specific period of time, right? So every bundle will have a duration, which is a number of years. So, for example, someone, a Hermes node, the Hermes node of a big German company doing something in whatever industry, they will upload that bundle, right? And they will be paying $12 for that bundle to be stored for each year. So if they want to hold it for 5 years, that's going to be $60 for that bundle. So what happens is whoever gets a response to that challenge, they would be holding that bundle for 5 years. And the total fraction, which is of course $1 per year times 5 years, that would be $5. The way it would work is that Atlas node will get paid, will earn, essentially get rewarded with $5 over 5 years. And how that works is that $5 will be cut in factors of 28 days up to 65%. So that means during the entire 5 years, you will get up to the 65%, and only when you have completed the entire duration, your part of the deal as an Atlas node holder, then you will get the last 35 paid in the last settlement, if you want, in the last reward component.
Okay, so but the community wants to know whether we have multiple operational system options, for example, like CentOS or Ubuntu for running servers on. Or do you recommend a specific server?
No, so the most important thing is that we're doing a lot of work, and that's really one of the things that keeps us busy these days is the whole onboarding process. And there were lots of questions from the community. Hey, will it be easy? Do I need a PhD in computer science to run those nodes and such? So the short answer is we are doing the hard work to make it easy on your side to be able to run without having a big experience. One thing which is also important is that all the nodes will be Dockerized. So that means essentially you just need a VPS where you will have Docker support, and from there we will do all the hard work to make sure that it's very easy for you to get started. So we're building a proper onboarding, very simple to use UI. We'll of course provide all the information and documentation how to do it. And once it's up and running, we are also exploring different tools to give you stats on the health of your node, to warn you if there's anything that is happening, if for some reason your VPS is experiencing some connectivity issue and such. We want to make sure that it's as easy and as painless for everyone running a node. That's a very important priority for us right now. So there is no specific OS, there is no specific recommendation. I know there were questions as well about the centrality, if every node is in the same VPS, or if everyone hosts their node in Amazon, if there's some centralization. I would say it's really a free market out there. I mean, every node operator has the option to pick whichever VPS. We don't want to recommend. We will of course provide some instruction for some VPSs we support, but by no means it means that you have to pick those. We're much more interested in giving anyone the option to run their masternode on which infrastructure they want, and technically it's going to be pretty straightforward to do.
Okay, so especially for the first round of onboarding, should we decide which system configuration is appropriate for the server by ourselves?
Yeah, so I know there were specific questions, what kind of servers, what kind of hardware. So for the Apollo nodes, that will not require a huge machine because it's not proof of work. You won't need to have 24 graphic cards somewhere with huge fans. It's going to be a standard VPS. We'll give some recommendation on what is required. But if you have a huge machine for an Apollo node or just a smaller machine, it won't make a huge difference. Very, very small one, I would say. What will make a difference is the uptime. So if you have an Apollo node, it's really important that you are up pretty much all the time. If you're not up, it's not a big deal. The only thing that happens is someone else will be mining your block for you. So as long as your node is offline, you don't earn any reward. That's for Apollo, of course. For Atlas, things are slightly different. For Atlas, you of course need less computation because you don't have much computation to do, but you will need to store a lot of bundles. And that's really important because the purpose of Atlas nodes is to store data that is used by customers who are using Amnet. So your node must be online. If your node is offline, that means the company cannot access the data they are paying you to store in a certain way. So that's really, really a fundamental element, is that you need to make sure that the node is up online as much as above a certain SLA that will be providing. And when it comes to auto scaling and all the specific configuration, that will mostly apply to the Hermes node. So Apollo and Atlas, you don't need to worry about auto scaling, about load balancing, and all of that. It's going to be a VPS. For Atlas, you will need more memory storage and have the ability to increase the storage you have access to. But for Hermes nodes, because it's a lot more about providing a certain service, Hermes nodes will need to scale. So a lot of the work we're doing as well is how can we replicate, how can we load balance, how we can ensure the robustness of Hermes nodes. And that's really the whole point of having an enterprise Hermes node. When you will be staking the 150K, the main reason you would be doing that is because you intend to build a service and you would be reselling that service to other customers yourself, and you can monetize that in your own way. So it's a piece of open source software which provides your functionality, and that piece of software, then you're providing an API. You're providing the same API as some of our Hermes nodes will be providing. So when you go on our API documentation right now, tech.ambrosus.com, there you have the documentation of the API. So essentially, and when you go on GitHub, you have the Ambrosus node repo. That Ambrosus node is essentially the Hermes node and also the Atlas node. But that repo is an API which you can modify. You can use different types of data storage, and that's really the idea behind the Hermes node. So for that, you will require more, but we're building all the tooling necessary for that.
Okay, but considering the HDD capacity in home hardware, like it seems to be very limited at the moment. Like, is it correct to say that the only way to manage the node would be via VPS?
I wouldn't say it's the only way. I mean, if you just have a laptop or a Raspberry Pi, that won't work for an Atlas node. You will very likely need at least a NAS. So if you have a NAS in your house and you have a very good internet connection and a very friendly provider that is essentially providing you a reliable connection, then you could run that on a decent NAS server.
Okay, so also can you give the community an estimate on ratio of private versus public bundles?
So I know there was some confusion on that specific question. So what's really important is every time someone is using Amnet by sending some data to a Hermes node, that Hermes node will put that asset or event into a bundle, regardless if the data is private or public. Every single asset and every single event on Ambrosus will be put in a bundle, and the bundle would be put publicly on the blockchain. The bundle hash will be put on the blockchain, and the actual data in the bundle will be put on Atlas nodes. Now, if a Hermes node has some data, some private data, they don't want to put publicly, the Hermes node will store data locally, but the metadata of that event or that asset will go anywhere in the bundle. So only the data will not be in the bundle, but all the metadata and the ID and the creation time and all that will go in the bundle anyway. So that means regardless if a company is creating private or public data, from a bundle perspective, from a reward and earning perspective, when it comes to Atlas node, it won't make a difference. The only difference is that the data will not be inside the bundle, because everything that is in a bundle is public. Every piece of data that is in a bundle is accessible by anyone. And that's accessible means your Atlas node will need to have at least an IP address or a URL that can be accessed from outside. So that's why if you have that just in your own house, it won't work. And that's really fundamental. And the private data will simply be stored in a Hermes node.
Okay, so I move back to Angel. So could you please explain a bit further the distribution and investing schedule of team tokens? Like the community recalls, there was a release date for team tokens in October, but not much more beyond that.
Yes, so the originally intended schedule was a 25% unlock of all team members over the period of 2 years. So each 6 months, 25% would be unlocked. So the first period was supposed to be this April, the second one in October. So thus, in theory, 50% of all the team tokens are due to get unlocked this October. However, this spring, so the team actually publicly announced that they are locking the tokens for an additional 6 months. This was to boost the general confidence that the team is interested in creating long-term value for the tokens, and we might do the same again in October. So we are basically interested to demonstrate to the community that we are building a long-term solution. A lot of the teams in crypto space, they dump their tokens first. They do it fast just to get money quickly. We don't mind playing a long-term game and turning Amber into something real. So we might actually announce another lockup period in October. So that's not a problem at all.
Okay, so like the original funding goal during the Ambrosus token generation event was close to 100 million, but only 32 million were raised. How does this restrict the further development of the project?
So in general, we cut down a lot of fluff and we just decided to stick with the core product, which is AmpNet, and core research and development, which is the innovation lab in Switzerland. So these are the two priorities. So we are focused more on the tech, both on the blockchain side and on the sensor side, as well as building all the interfaces and protocols connecting the two sides. So we want to build a very valuable technology first, demonstrate it to the corporate. So we're taking a more of a lean approach. And there is a lot of money going into just basic R&D on both on the sensor side and just playing with cryptoeconomics, running different simulations, rolling out the network, testing different environments and so on. So there's a lot of manpower involved in that. And of course, also everything related to corporate adoption, business development. So running the different POCs with companies, running different dApps, helping to shape the AmpNet itself, the core product, as per needs of the corporate players. So from that perspective, we've been focusing a lot on that. Some parts which we decided to reduce the funding of, we might change down the road. So for instance, with marketing, we definitely didn't play well in terms of the disadvantages that we have in terms of marketing. So we've recently made a U-turn on that. So we're spending more money on this. But importantly, the big chunk of it is going to development of the product and working on the corporate adoption.
Okay, so also native AMB wallet has been mentioned several times already. Like, will this include Ledger support? If so, in what time frame?
Yeah, so in general, we actually we will work on the support of Ledger for the native AMP. In the past, we've already been in touch with the Ledger team, so they are always quite responsive despite being very busy. And we will reach out to them again to see on how they could support native AMP on Ledger. Of course, we do want to enable people to store their native AMP in a safe way. As Vlad previously mentioned, we're still working out exactly whether ERC20 is going to go one way for the conversion on the native token or whether we're going to have two in parallel. So this is the part which we're still investigating and we're discussing with different stakeholders, because obviously the ERC20 has a broad support right now, but at the same time, of course, having a native token might be valuable as well. But anyway, as soon as the native token is there, we will also start working on the integration for not only Ledger, but for Trezor and other open source hardware wallets, because we do want people to be able to securely store the tokens.
Okay, so I think we are done with the questions.
No, we're not.
So
There are actually some
let me
more.
see. Let me just see what else do we have.
So on the trading, we answered
Okay.
the fact that yes, those where it was uninterrupted security, and then these are some more questions.
Okay, so for
And then there
companies.
are lots of questions too, actually, another batch afterwards.
Yeah.
So first, these are mine. Yeah.
Okay, so for companies running Apollo nodes, how is it managed with the VAT? Because a master node is providing service to the clients and it earns money. So in most European countries, VAT has to be paid to the state to remain into legality.
Yeah, so for tax-related questions, obviously, I mean, the basic thing I have to say is speak to your lawyer about that. We're not able to give advice on tax and so on. But in general, obviously, of course, different countries have different legal interpretation on what services do, or actually what is under the VAT. So from that perspective, they may treat master nodes functionality differently. Some countries actually already have the initial rulings of the courts where they say that any consumption of a utility token is an event which should have a VAT. So the moment somebody uses a system using a utility token, that's technically a service delivered and VAT should apply. So it will be interesting how this might affect different companies in the blockchain space, not only Ambrosus, but the whole industry. So I would say, obviously, it's a pretty open question, and a lot of lawyers will be, I guess, working on that in the forthcoming years.
Okay, so how will token burning work and how will it affect the number of node holders?
So in general, as was explained in the cryptoeconomic update that we've released, the 5% of the fee for creation of bundles, for example, is in Amber, is permanently burned, thus reducing the total number of coins available in the supply, in the circulation. So the point is that, of course, initially this will create more digital scarcity of the token, and it should not affect the node holders too much, because in terms of the number of the nodes, because actually as there will be fewer coins in the circulation for other cryptocurrencies where the total supply was reducing, assuming stable usage of the network, even when the total supply of available utility coins is reducing, then the value of each individual coin is actually growing. So from that perspective, the transactions in bundles, which are fixed in a fiat currency, will result in a smaller amount of AMB, of Amber, and thus the number of Ambers burned in the future transactions will be smaller. So actually, at some point, there will be an equilibrium reached in terms of the number of coins that have been burned versus the actual current value of the coin. So at some point, it will the burning rate will dwindle. It will not be as significant. So it should not result in the reduction of the number of nodes and so on. Of course, there may be cases where, for instance, in the event that Amber becomes valuable, whether the opportunity cost for some node operators to operate their node may become high, and then they'll be incentivized to sell to other participants in the market. So that's obviously a normal tendency on the open market. But this will be left, obviously, to the markets to decide on how they will do it. The important aspect of the burning is obviously to make sure that the network itself is incentivizing different participants to participate in the network and stake in it long term.
Is the amount of AMB holding linked with the seniority? More specifically, for example, like person A bought 1 AMB 100 days ago and has been holding. Person B bought 10 AMB 30 days ago and has been holding. Like, which one would have the priority over another one?
Yes. So as I mentioned previously, so the holding period matters more. So and let's say a Zeta that's been there since the TGE will have a higher priority than a Sigma that has been there for a few months less. However, of course, if the period of holding for, let's say, two candidates or two potential nodes, people with amounts sufficient with node are similar in terms of how long they've held the tokens, then of course the tiebreaker could be the amount of tokens that is held.
Okay, so we are moving forward to Vlad's questions.
The last question. Yeah.
So like last questions to Vlad. So like a community member asks like, will I have a better chance? Sorry, motorbike. So will I have a better chance of securing a node if I upgrade to a bigger node?
That's a good question. I mean, we want to make sure that also persons who are interested in a smaller nodes, they also have equal chances of having a node. Of course, in the long term, what's important is to ensure we have enough capacity in the network, enough storage for our needs. And technically, we could only accept bigger nodes, but we're not interested in doing that. We prefer to have an even distribution so that both smaller nodes, medium nodes, and large nodes have a fair share and a fair play. And of course, it requires more smaller nodes than bigger nodes for the same amount, because as we mentioned as well in the last post, when you have a larger node, you have proportionally more a higher cap, so it's not just proportional, but it's actually a slightly more exponential in that sense. So it's interesting, and that provides a lot more capacity. But we're definitely interested in having a good balance.
Is a mobile wallet on iOS, Android plan to stake AMB, or it's only on desktop?
So we are definitely interested in having a mobile wallet. I don't know which one will come first. There may be a possibility that we might even have a mobile wallet before we have a desktop one. We are definitely exploring mobile wallets for now. We're not going to release anything in a very short term, but definitely for the full public launch, which will be in October, we'll definitely have at least one of those for sure. And ideally, yeah, we'll have at least one mobile version as well.
But will it be possible to have a master node easy to set up for people with medium tech knowledge? Means that will help us to do the setup?
That's clearly an important question, and I answered that already before. We do want to make sure that the experience of onboarding a new node, of you running a node, of someone operating that node, is as easy, as seamless, and as frustration free as possible. So it's really important for us, and we're developing now a very simple web-based user interface to set up your node, to apply. There's a lot of work involved in that, and we've been focusing, of course, on the core technology first, but that's going to be fundamental. And for sure, for the public mainnet release, that will be easy. Before that, we'll be investing a little bit more time in helping people, and especially early adopters who want first to play around with the testnet. We'll be helping people to set up their own nodes. We'll definitely provide all the information required. So it's not going to be, hey, here's some code, good luck. Quite a lot the opposite. That's really important for us.
So how does the Ambrosus solution compare cost-wise to the Hyperledger solution?
Yeah, it's hard to argue. First, you don't need to hire very expensive consultants like some big companies do when you want to use their blockchain solution. Ours is essentially open source. There's no license fee or anything. So from a company perspective, if you want to use Ambrosus, you have a very fixed, very easy, very clear model. A bundle is $12, and a bundle is 16,000 plus events or assets, and that gives you a very, very simple pricing model. That means you can create a few million assets and events per month with a few $1,000s in bundle upload fees, and that's all there is to worry about. So I don't think any corporate solution, and certainly not other project, have such a clear, predictable, and easy to understand from a business perspective view on pricing.
Also, I think more or less we are done with the questions. So maybe there are any questions from the community right now in the YouTube chat, which we are actually reading.
Should we just scroll up? I think there were a few interesting questions.
Okay, so there are already questions coming.
Yeah, so I saw this, Ashley, I saw this question before, so I'll get it. As we mentioned, for $12, that's the upload fee for a bundle, right? From that $12, $7 go to in total go to 7 Atlas nodes, so $1 each. 5% of that will go to that ambulance. 5% of that will be burned, and that leaves us 25%. So 25% of every single bundle upload will be shared amongst. We're still going. Internet is still up. No more light. And 25% of every bundle created will be shared between the Apollo nodes. So that means the more bundles, the more the 25% represents. Other questions?
So number of bundles currently on the mainnet? Maybe. So no.
Well, we
do the nodes
How do they
earning when they
continue?
max
How
storage?
do nodes continue earning? Okay, so there was also this question. I wanted to reply that earlier. So how does that work? When you store a bundle, you have to store it for a specific period of time, right? So it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. Before you apply, you respond to a challenge, you will see, hey, there's bundle X. Do you want to store it? And it's going to be broadcast to every Atlas node. Every Atlas node could say, I don't want to store bundles that require more than 1 year because I played a short-term strategy. You can do that, or you can say maybe some other Atlas node, they say, because there is less competition for bundles that need to be stored 5 years, then some Atlas nodes might specialize in long-term storage because they know they do that on the long term, and there will be a lot less competition on long-term bundles, on bundles that are stored for 5 years. So they might jump onto there's action. And they might be interested because there will be less competition on those nodes and they will apply to those helicopters. We're having literally everything. I love Berlin. I mean, it's my favorite city. So I think the point is you will have a total amount of bundles that you can store. It's going to be X. And your node will be able to have at any time X bundles. And if you have X bundles, they will be created at different times, of course. And every bundle will have its expiration date. And we just check, okay, this node, how many bundles do they currently have? If they didn't reach their cap, they can apply for new bundles. If they have already reached, they won't be able to get a new bundle. All right. Yeah.
we can use the mobile.
We can use the light.
Screen.
We're very creative. Woohoo. Yeah, this is live. I mean, someone asked, but it's true. Yeah, and that's he answered. I think that was Mr. Beowulf. Sounded like it was him. He's in Berlin. Awesome. I think that was him. He was here. That's awesome. Sounded because that sounded like a bear and a wolf together, so that might have been him. Awesome. Cool. So are there? You have different colors and filters. So, any other? Woo, thanks. I think our prayers have been exhausted. Exhaust. Good. Okay, so who are the clients you said were waiting? So obviously we cannot say who they are. There are some companies with whom we've been already testing. They have been using our own testnet for now. They've been using our own Hermes nodes to create those bundles. I don't see where 27K bundles on mainnet. I don't see where that figure comes. So that must be a Photoshop of me saying something I've never said. But I think those numbers, they will. We'll see how that works. We'll see how those projects are. We're looking at the different projects in question, trying to understand the right trade-off, because technically they can put a little bit of data, they can put a lot of data. Our cost was made so that it's particularly interesting, because if you look at the cost of a serialization solution, it's very, very expensive per asset. We're providing at least a 10 or almost 100 times less per asset to use something like Mnet to create the identity of your own node. This is the best city in the world. I love it. So So Chris, so yeah, I mean, you said January 2019. I mean, yeah, there will be a lot more. It's not the beginning. I mean, as we said, we will start. We have already launched the mainnet. We have that up and running now. For next month is going to be very internal, so just finishing the edges. But you know, I can show you a screenshot if you really insist on us having that mainnet out there. By in a month from now, roughly at the end of this month, we will start onboarding more and more masternodes from the community. There will be few, I would say, next 2 months, but our objective is from end of October, which will be the public release. From that point, we want everyone to start being able to connect. Hey, you're live. Say hi. Good. Yeah, I don't know what they're smoking, but it's burning stuff. Must be some pharma stuff. Good. All right. But yeah, how those 7 masternodes are selected? So they're not selected; they're selecting themselves. So there is a notification every time someone wants to upload a bundle. They will call a function on the Ambrosus blockchain. Every time a Hermes node wants to upload a bundle, they'll say, "Hey, I have a bundle to upload, and here is the Amber tokens corresponding to $12." And then every other Atlas node will be able to see that notification and apply, "Hey, I want to get the bundle." And the first 7 ones will be getting it. And of course, once a node is full, there's no point applying because you won't be getting that bundle anyway. Yeah, so there's another question. If you store bundles for 5 years on Atlas and fill up your bundle allocation quickly, yeah, but remember that if you store something for 5 years, you earn 5 times more than if you were storing it for 1 year. So essentially, you're back at the same place. So if you store, I don't know, X 100,000 of bundles for a year, or the same quantity for 5 years, then you are exactly at the same place. Yeah, there's no music. I think those guys, they just, I don't know, what do you do?
Don't provoke them.
Will there be a preference for people who want to commit to long-term node hosting? So I would say that's interesting for us to have long-term hosting. That will not be a criteria. So if someone just wants to host, to select bundles for 1 year, that's also fine. We will not explicitly not accept anyone who wants to store bundles for 1 year. And the reason is that's a free market. Every Atlas node is free to decide what they store, when they store. So if you are interested, once you have an Atlas masternode, if you just want to store short-term bundle or only long-term bundles or any bundle that you can store, it's really up to every single Atlas node to set up their strategy. And that's something we've been playing a lot in the background to see how to make this possible for you to customize. So you might have a slider. Do you want to store a lot more long-term, short-term? And if you select longer term, there will be less Atlas nodes jumping on longer term, because that means you have to store for 5 years to get the last 35% of your storage fee. Yes, 7 is 70%. Yeah.
So correct.
Yeah, hold on. Let me check those numbers to be sure, but yeah. Let me check those numbers in a second, but they're definitely there. Anyways, let's get to another question, and I'll obviously respond to that in a second.
Yeah, the chat disappeared. Oh, it's back. Okay, now
it disappeared again.
If Apollo nodes don't require so much storage compared to the Atlas nodes, Can we assume Atlas nodes will have more rewards since they will have more expenses for storage?
So what was the question? If Apollo nodes don't not require compared to Atlas?
There's a follow-up question.
Yeah, so the first question, if Apollo nodes do not need storage, the role of the Apollo nodes is different than the Atlas nodes, right? So the Apollo nodes, they are ensuring the integrity of the blockchain and they're validating transactions. The Atlas node, they are storing data and the role they play is different. So of course the work, to put it that way, is different. Of course, the value of an Apollo node is not so much on how much processing they do, but on maintaining the integrity of the network. And that's what they get rewarded. And that's also why they have to pass through a proper KYC and contractual relation, unlike Atlas nodes, which don't require the same thing. So that's one very interesting aspect. Why limited storage for masternodes? The simple answer is if there is no limited storage, you can have anyone with especially for Atlas nodes, you can have an Atlas node that just gets fatter and fatter at the expense of other nodes. And we are interested in maintaining some sort of equilibrium in the network so that everyone can get a substantial amount of data to share and that it's somewhat equilibrated between the different nodes.
Yeah, on the KYC question regarding the company, so usually when it's KYC on the company, then you only look at the shareholders who hold 25% or more of the company. So usually your KYC only the main beneficiaries of the company. You don't go for every team member or every minority stakeholder. The rest of the questions are on nodes again.
Okay. So the Sigma reward. So I think what I can confirm is that I won't give exactly those numbers, so the proportion between the different Atlas classes, but the proportion is actually slightly higher than what was there. So it's slightly better to have a larger node than a medium or a smaller node. But those numbers, I would say they're at least that. Hard numbers on each class and hardware. Again, all those questions, I mean, it's kind of the same questions. We need to finalize all the simulation and we need to make sure that they support the needs of the projects running on AMNet first. That's the number one priority. Can we provide a meaningful, reliable, secure, scalable service to companies? If we can do that, there will be no traction in the network and there's no point of having a node. And that's really a fundamental point. We want to make sure that the service provided to businesses is competitive and better than what they're currently getting with just the centralized servers. If we cannot do that, they will keep using the same centralized technology and we don't have a role to play. So it's fundamental we do that. So I think that's exactly the point. So I mentioned $1. The number is $1.2 each, and that's the mistake I've done. So it's not $1 per bundle; it's actually $1.2 per bundle, and now the maths are adding. So that was the thing, and why that's the case is from an enterprise perspective. They are paying $12, and that's essentially $1 per month, and that's something an enterprise can understand. Is like, okay, well, one bundle, $1 per month. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. And from that $1, 70% is gonna be given to those Apollo nodes. So you don't get $1, you get 1.2. And I think I don't know if I have that graph, but we'll definitely be sharing it at some point as soon as we have finalized those numbers. But think that this $1.2 will be given over time to that node. So that's the answer. You're waiting for soon. Will you communicate with first tester? Yeah, I would say, I mean, as soon as as soon as we start onboarding nodes, for us that's going to be also something particularly interesting is anyone who starts participating and giving feedback and being really more participative, we will definitely help and start investigating. And there are various people on Telegram that are reaching out, they're having technical questions, they started running our nodes. This is very valuable for us, and it's really, really interesting to be able to communicate. So short answer, we definitely do want to work with the community on that. We do want to understand how the whole incentive rewards work. And remember that for a specific for a given quantity of bundles being created on Mnet, because that costs a specific fee, the more nodes there will be, the less reward per node. And I think this is the equilibrium we have to guarantee, is that we can add new nodes when the network usage will increase. Because if we don't do that, it would be less and less interesting from an incentive point of view for every node to participate and maintain the network. And this is the delicate balance we need to ensure to do. I think we've been very strong because with all the stuff around us, we're still going and
yeah. So concerning the question on the logo of TFL Dude, so it was an old version of the platform, and once we've released the new one, the logo has also been moved. So there is a new link to the platform. That one was found, I think, by the community from the code itself. So once we upgraded the protocol, we moved to the other link.
There are lots of questions about gigabytes for the VPS. What's going to be really important is, if you have
That's a good question on the nodes there.
If you're storing only 1% of your total capacity, you don't have to pay for 100% of your total capacity. So you would be increasing the storage as the amount of bundles you're storing increases. So that means if you will not be paying for the full price of I don't know how many gigabytes if you're not literally using that. Yeah, so do company pay upfront to the whole cost of bundles? So what happens to the payment before nodes receive it? So the way it would work is that companies will I don't know, let's say uploading a bundle today costs I don't know, 20 Ambers. That's the cost to upload a bundle. So the company will have 20 Amber, and they send that to a smart contract to get that paid. A fraction of that will be going to will be burned. A fraction of that will be going to the Apollo nodes, and then at the point when the smart contract receives the bundle creation, it will make a calculation on how many Amber tokens they need to give out to the node. So
hey, shut up, please.
Thanks.
We want to sleep now.
Okay. Well, I think that was pretty clear. Good.
We can move the laptop inside.
Yeah. So welcome to Berlin. Yeah, that was it's fun that 5 minutes ago they were drinking beer, smoking, yelling, and preventing us, and now they want to sleep.
Timetable is timetable.
Yeah, well, organic clock.
1:30.
Yeah,
it's a good way to conclude, I guess.
That was, but I hope he answered some question. Good. We can go inside and continue.
Okay.
Don't mind. It's the buffet, but anyway, let's not do bad advertisements. Bear with us, Mr. Bear with us for a few minutes. That gives you time to prepare other questions that were not answered.
You should sell it in the mic.
Yeah, that gives you time to answer questions that were not answered.
Развела? Где второй?
У тебя уже что?